Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great Divorce Podcast. I go to the gym about 3 times a week. And as I've mentioned before on the podcast, it's as much for the mental and emotional benefits of how I feel when I work out as it is for the physical benefits. Now, I used to belong to this one particular gym here in Las Vegas. Part of my routine was to walk, jog. That's what I do, walk, jog around the track that surrounded all the equipment and the treadmills and whatnot. And while walking or jogging around the track, I frequently passed two older gentlemen who usually spoke rather loudly, loudly enough so that I, or indeed anyone within 50 yards, could hear their conversation. And the thing that stood out to me about these two guys was their constant talking about politics. And of course, as you might expect, this wasn't a fascinating contrast in views, a provocative probing of beliefs that might result in some reassessment of long held positions. No, it was a political echo chamber, just like you'd find on MSNBC or Fox, with people congratulating each other on the superiority of their beliefs and demonizing the other side. I must have encountered these two fellows at least a dozen times. And it got to the point that whenever I saw them, my walk would quickly turn into a jog so that I could leave their conversation in the dust. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking that my personal beliefs differed to theirs or that I found their views so repugnant that I had to run away. I can assure you that's not the case. In fact, I might have agreed with a few things they said. As an aside, I'll say right now that I consider myself a middle of the road independent. I have friends who are liberal and friends who are conservative. And it's funny, my conservative friends think I'm a liberal, and my liberal friends think I'm a conservative. Anyway, let's return to these guys at the gym. What fascinated me so much, but what I found so disheartening, was they didn't talk about anything but politics. I wondered if they ever talked about anything else. Perhaps I'm overreacting, and that for these guys, the gym time was politics time. I doubt it. I have a sinking feeling that it was politics 24/7. Didn't they have grandchildren to talk about? Hadn't they taken any trips with their wives that they could talk about? We live in Las Vegas. Didn't they have any poker stories to tell? Honestly, I would have found it a relief to have overheard them discuss arthritis or their prostates. The point of this is that I'm convinced that the current political discourse in this country is a great source of unhappiness. And I suspect that this cause of unhappiness is being felt in marriage and non-marital relationships. You've heard me talk an awful lot on this podcast about the causes of late life divorce. And I've begun to wonder if politics shouldn't be added to the list of issues bringing about the increasing divorce rates in the older population. If we acknowledge the fact that, yes, gray divorce rates have increased over recent decades, and that, yes, political polarization and political disagreements in relationships seem more frequent and intense than in past decades, can we assume that political disagreements are a measurable cause of the rise in divorce among older Americans? We may assume, but I was unable to find any strong studies that specifically quantify how much the increase in gray divorce is related to political disagreement. There are some surveys about politics causing relationship conflict, but nothing specifically about older, longer married couples. For instance, a study that's now 8 years old from Wakefield Research, an Arlington, Virginia polling firm, found that 1 in 10 couples, whether married or unmarried, had ended their relationship over political disagreements, with millennials parting way at a particularly high rate of 22%. The survey, which was conducted nationwide with 1,000 participants, also found that a similar 22% of Americans know a couple whose marriage or relationship have been negatively impacted, specifically following the 2016 election. Also, anecdotal reports from divorce attorneys suggest that political conflicts are more pronounced over the last 8 or 9 years and are leading couples to split. One other fact potentially linking gray divorce rates in politics, perhaps evidenced by my friends at the gym, is that older people do tend to be more rooted in their beliefs, both because of lifelong reinforcement and because identity and social context tend to harden with age. But I will say, I don't think it's fair to paint anyone over 60 as particularly intransigent. A lot of people remain flexible and cultivate a spirit of openness and curiosity and may be willing to change their opinion. Arthur Brooks, who I'm sure I've mentioned before in this podcast, is a noted writer and speaker who's talked a lot about politics and its impact on happiness. He's also offered quite a few opinions about political disagreement within marriage and close relationships, the problems it can cause, and his suggestions on how we might deal with these problems. Brooks doesn't argue that politics is unimportant, neither do I, but we both agree that political polarization, tribalism, and a politics-first obsession can hurt an individual's sense of well-being. In 2019, Brooks wrote a book called Love Your Enemies: How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt. In this book and other articles and speeches, Brooks argues that polarization and tribalness hurt happiness. He sees the rise of a culture where people feel like victims, or told they are victims, as one reason happiness is declining. This culture of constantly judging other people, particularly in social media, is also something that increases anxiety and resentment. Political polarization tends to stoke grievance, fear, and anger. It provokes an us versus them thinking, and these mental states undermine happiness. This political culture encourages people to be haters. We're told to hate the other side by our political parties and the media. Can you imagine an outlook on life based on hate that could produce anything other than unhappiness? Brooks suggests that spending too much emotional energy on national politics, particularly that fueled by partisan media channels of the left or right, tends to make people anxious, frustrated, or angry, much more than empowered. He encourages people to look for a form of political engagement that's more helpful to one's local community, which might be volunteering or engaging in politics in a way that helps others rather than just arguing or consuming political content. Brooks identifies his big four priorities, which should outrank politics when it comes to happiness. The first of his big four is faith, and he acknowledges that faith is different for different people. It might not even be religious, but something bigger than you. 2, family. 3, friends. And here Brooks alludes to something I mentioned earlier. Historically, we didn't decide our friendships based on what political party we vote for. Maybe we should get back to that. Fourth, Brooks talks about something I've mentioned many times in the context of finding a purposeful life when emerging from late life divorce, and that's impactful work, doing something with yourself that serves others. Combined, this big four contributes to what Brooks calls a happiness 401k, the things we need to be paying attention to other than politics. In his work, Brooks has shone a light on the problems that the current political culture can bring to marriage. He also offers some suggestions about how we might overcome these problems. Brooks argues that it's contempt, not just disagreement, that tears people apart. Drawing on the marriage research of others, he notes that it's not simply anger or having different opinions that can lead to marital trouble. It's contempt, sarcasm, dismissiveness, eye-rolling, the types of behaviors that send a dismissive message to your partner, which can undermine relationships. It doesn't help that society, where we live, can amplify the problem and make it more likely that couples will bring this toxicity they see in the world into their personal relationships, even if it's unintentional. We all understand that disagreements are normal in marriage and even healthy. The issue is when disagreement is handled in ways that degrade the other person's dignity. Of course, many marital therapists and psychologists have argued that it's not so much about avoiding disagreement, but learning to disagree better. Brooks recommends that we attempt to break the contempt habit. We need to notice when we're slipping into sarcasm or eye rolling and just stop it. We need to replace those actions, reactions, and listen. Respect the other person and don't always assume the worst of motives. I agree wholeheartedly with Brooks' contention that we need to speak honestly to our partners. We can't suppress disagreements out of fear. Silence or avoiding conflict may be the safer route, but it can lead to emotional distance. Honest communication helps create mutual trust. And it helps to be open and curious about your partner's views, not treating them as a threat, but as something to understand. To conclude, I hope that maybe you've picked up something that's interested you in my musings about politics and marriage. And maybe, if you recognize yourself getting drawn into a political quagmire on social media, try pausing for a moment. Put your phone down or turn the computer off and go for a walk. Go to your grandkid's soccer game. Play with your pet. Or better yet, volunteer in an animal shelter. Recently, I went to a small town monthly city hall meeting in South Carolina. It was fascinating how various community members worked together to improve the town and how civilized the discussion was compared to the malevolence that you see in the media around the national debates. As an exercise in real politics, try going to your city hall for one of the regular meetings. And if that doesn't help, try going to the gym. You can't always escape politics there, but you can always run away. Until next time, take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Grey Divorce Podcast. To learn more or get in contact with your host, you can visit Andrew's website at transcendretirement.net. Also, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Information provided is educational only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Each situation is unique and should be discussed with your tax or legal advisor prior to implementation. Andrew Hatherley is not an attorney and does not provide legal advice. Information provided is financial in nature. Advisory services offered through Hatherley Capital Management, LLC. Divorce financial analysis services offered through Wiser Divorce Solutions, an affiliated company.